Okay, we've heard the different views from different personalities as far as the amendment of the Constitution is concerned, which was held at the 6 geopolitical zones in the state. Now, let me start with a huge question here. This Constitution amendment, is it necessary at this time? Because different persons have come out to say, even on this platform, that the problem is not the Constitution. Even though it is not perfect, the Constitution needs some work, but it is much more of issue of execution than the Constitution itself. Because with some of the provisions that are in the Constitutions, a lot of politicians, especially at the executive arm, keep flaunting these provisions. Now, and there are different examples. The judiciary, for example, that's resulted in the Justin strike, which we'll talk later, where it is clearly stated judiciary autonomy, but the executives, especially at the state level, keeping the judiciary at their tongue, wanting to use them however they are. Let's not talk about even the presidency, where there have been lots, he's been accused, for total disregard for the rule of law and the Constitution. So these are just few of the so many instances. So is it the Constitution or the rulers or the politicians or, the ruling elite, as it were, or the politicians?
The two need to be worked on.
Okay.
The human capital, the humans who enforce the laws or who execute the laws, they need to be addressed. And then the Constitution itself also require address and amendment. But the problem we're having here is that we think amending the Constitution only is the problem. We don't.
We just practically solve all the problems we have.
Amending the human person is much more deeper than amending the Constitution. Because if you look at the Constitution, for example, from section 13, okay, down talking about fundamental objective and directive principles of state policy. The only part of that Constitution that guarantee free education, that guarantees education for all, and then for those who are out of job, a payment for them, taking care of the citizens, the total welfare package. If you remember, it's in that same chapter 2 that you have section 14.2 that says the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. You see all that put together. The elite, just like senior colleague, Leonard Sick, Femi Falana stated just now, that the elite, the executive class conspired and then insert section 6, subsection C of the 1999 Constitution, which says that all the provisions of that chapter 2 are not justiciable. So you cannot take government to court to enforce any of those fundamental socio-economic rights. So what then is a country? What then is the essence of government if the part of the Constitution that guarantees humanity is not justiciable? So what then is the essence of government? That is the question. And whatever amendment we're doing, whether human amendment or a constitutional amendment, it must be an amendment that will guarantee that power hits from bottom to top. What we're having is that we have shook the Constitution, structured it to make sure that power runs from up to down. And that is the problem we're having, because right now we have to submit our allegiance, everything we have, to Abuja. Then Abuja decides what is going on in our backyard, and at the end of the day, you're unable to run the country. Now, let me give you an example. If you look at the Apapa Seaport, for example, I've always given this example. Just imagine that Apapa local government is the one managing that seaport. That place would have been something different, because power should be at the bottom. That is where the people are. If you have a constitution that takes power to the top, how many people do you have at the top? Let's say, for example, ministers, 2 from each state or 1 from each state. Then let's say for the senators, 3 from each state, House of Rep, depending on the population. Okay? And then what you have is less than 1%. And then you take the entire structure of power and place it in the hand of less than 1% of the population. Then that 1% is now administering power from an obscured obscured place. He's unable to get. Now, if you now come down to the state too, the same thing is replicated in the state. You just gather few, less than 1%, pack the entire power of the state and put in their hand, including the power to manage land and everything, to govern everything. You abolish freehold, created leasehold, put it in the hand of the governor. Now, you know that these politicians also, they don't really understand how to deregulate power. So that power, because if you see, we are trying to review and amend right now, whereas the fourth amendment we are still violating it. Part of the amendment we did, the last amendment was the fourth amendment, okay, the fourth alteration. Now we are still violating those ones. Now we are trying to amend. What is the essence of amending what you are not going to keep, what you are going to violate?
Now that is the question.
That is how I'm saying that much more than amending the Constitution, the human person, those who enforce the laws and those who execute it, we must amend them first to get it right. Because this same person, when they get into office, the first thing they do is that they take an oath of office. And taking an oath of office will mean that you swear to the Constitution to defend it. But when you get there, you do the other side of it. And then you get away with it. When you get away with it, that's what I'm saying. That people should not violate the law and get away with it. They should be punished. They should be reprimanded, and all the penalties that accrue to that should be used against them.
Okay, let me come to you, Barrister Zwana. The constitution review, is it necessary, especially with the continued violation of this constitution?
Thank you very much. I would like to start by recalling what some very senior members of the legal profession have said. Some of them have said that the 1999 Constitution is not amendable. That is, that it cannot be amended because of the inherent fraud in the Constitution as is contained in the preamble. And people who hold this view are very eminent members of our profession, including Afe Babalola, Professor Akin Oyebode, and people like that. They say that we don't have a constitution, that 1999 Constitution is a fraud, because the preamble told us that we, the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, having firmly and solemnly resolved. They say that this is a fraud. They hold the opinion that, like Lord Dennis said in the old case of McFoy and UAC, that you cannot put something, McFoy and UAC, that you can't put something on nothing and expect it to remain there. Say it will collapse. They say that what we are doing now is the normal Nigerian way, that this so-called constitutional amendment will take us nowhere. Some of them have said that we should go back to the Independence Constitution of 1960. Some have said we should go back to the Republican Constitution of 1963. Then, where do we go from there? So they hold the views, and very strongly, that we are just wasting our time. That the so-called amendment will go nowhere. That we had the last one, the National Conference of 2014, during the time of...
That really had nothing to do with the Constitution, really.
No, you see, that is something that is more akin to people's, that would have been a people's constitution, as against the 1999 Constitution that was crafted and given to the country by a handful of military officers. But having said that, if one looks at Section 168 of the Evidence Act, which talks about presumption of regularity, because if we maintain that we haven't gotten a constitution since 1999, then that means we are going back to the Hobbesian state, a state of anarchy, a state of higgledy-piggledy, no order, no nothing. Then what would have happened to the official acts that have been performed by various presidents, various governors from 1999, the time of Obasanjo, from Obasanjo to Yar'Adua to Jonathan, and even what would we have said about that? So I think that, be that as it may, Section 168 substitution one of the evidence I would have taken that, which talks about presumption of legality. So I will not support the view that we don't have a constitution. But the problem is now, how do we go about amending it to make it effective? This very regime has about 2 years to go. When Jonathan called the 2014 conference, he was hoping that his regime was going to implement the recommendations of that confab. So I think we're actually dancing the music we don't know where it will lead us to. Yes.
So the question now is, how do you work on a constitution where people won't respect, the politicians, are much more loyal to their party, and the Ghana must go, than the constitution itself? So how do you waste your time amending a constitution that you won't follow anyway, and you, just like he has said, you get away with it?
I think we should find a way of deregulating power in this country. The Millennium friend says something like that, how to deregulate, or how to, for this country to operate a proper federal system of government. Because what we have as of today is a unitary system of government, where most things, most power, most authority, everything resides at the center. And that is the main reason why the Constitution is not obeyed by most of the operators of this Constitution. So we have a problem.
Okay, you talked about human persons that execute the law. So how do we work on that as against the Constitution, the book itself?
Yeah, we can work on it when we train our lawmakers and the executive, members of the executive, and even the larger society on how to respect the sacred letters of the law of the country. You cannot call yourself patriotic if you do not respect the sacred letters of the Constitution.
So that can that be done with this amendment?
But what I'm saying is that nobody's talking about that. I was at Marriott, I was at the Keja Center for it. And when we got there, I thought it was a public hearing. But I saw, government officials here and there carrying paper, book here and there, bags here and everywhere all over the place. Governor, senators, House of Assembly members. The whole place was crowded. They hardly gave a time or chance for the public. And it's a public hearing. But these are the same leaders who have been micromanaging the Constitution before now. And now there's a public rally, they have overtaken the place again. So at the end of the day, you are wondering, what exactly are we doing? That's why I said the human person. Because for the 2 days, constitutional law is my area of specialty. So I was able to, on the second day, I concluded that this is a journey to nowhere. It's a journey to nowhere because the factors responsible for the constitutional failure and then the legalistic drawback in our process is not being addressed. First of all, in that Constitution, we should make provisions that we deal with people treacherously, people that will violate the provisions treacherously. We should have that in the Constitution. And secondly, there's a part of it we are not also looking at. Do you know that this country is we are a federalism halfway? But because...
Not true federalism.
No, we are not true federalism. No, we are federalism halfway. But that halfway, we have not even been able to manage and implement it. Okay, look at the states, for example. When you talk about agriculture, it falls directly at this concurrent state level, okay? Talk about pay tax and all that. Talk about other areas, like if you look at paragraph 14 of the second schedule of the Constitution, that says that the governor of a state can generate power, okay, to cover areas in the state that are not covered by the national grid. Okay, but the few governors that attempted to do that still went to Abuja to ask for license. Whereas the law has already given you the power. And then the Minister for Power then was arguing it until when he left office. That was when he saw the law. But the attorney generals of this respective state ought to educate the governors of this state. You don't need license again. So what I'm saying is that we have certain provisions in our laws. Okay, the problem we have is that the governors are just looking for oil money from Abuja. They don't want to look at the constitution and say, okay, what about the powers we have? The governor, for example, holds the land in the state in trust for the citizens according to the Land Use Act. That land that he holds in trust for the people, what has he done to use that power to generate resources for the state? Like in Kaduna State now, the governor is sacking 7,000 workers. And then he's blaming the workers, whereas the government employed them. Why should you make a policy to employ a number you cannot manage and then visit it on the people and then punish the people for your deficiency? So these are the things we are talking about. That even though the constitution is not perfect, what it has provided for us to manage our state, the governors have also failed in that regard. So when we are talking about amendment, we should not just talk about amendment. We should also talk about the powers already given that is underutilized, that we are unable to manage, that we have not developed strategy to manage and then create wealth for the state. Those are issues. Then that chapter 2, we must do something about it. All the countries that got independence, the same time we got independence, that part of the constitution is not justiciable. Look at India, look at some of the countries in Asia that had independence in 60, 61, 62, 64 with us. They've all left us. That aspect, socio-economic rights in most countries are now justiciable. Because if you don't make it justiciable, there is no way the citizen can enforce it against the government. And that is what we are saying. Make that justiciable. Then amend the constitution. The human factor that is responsible for derailing the constitution and making it impracticable to create wealth for the state, do something about it. Let's have a system that works. That's exactly what we are saying. But if you go to the conference, the 2-day, you hardly hear things like that. What we are talking about is women affirmation, increase women visibility, let's create more states. Creating more states. You see, a state is a region. When you go back to 1963 constitution, a state is a region. Just like if you go back to 1963, what it means is that maybe you want to collapse all the states, maybe like 6 states into one, right? That's, if you collapse into one, that is a region. If it's 6, it's a region. It's the same landmass, it's the same space. Why don't you think of what to do with that power you have in that region? And then let's develop the constitution. So, I mean, what I'm saying, I think this will lead us nowhere to say this.
Well, listen, at least let's be a little optimistic.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about some of the issues that have topped, the discussion.
Yes.
Let's start from devolution of powers. Now, is there any difference really between the states managing their resources and the region managing their resources? Because I get confused, and I'm sure a lot of Nigerians are confused about that too.
You see, when you talk about, it's just mere terminology, whether it is a state or region, basically the same.
Now,
it's a political unit, political entity.
Now, for example, let's use the Niger Delta now for instance. The Niger Delta,
9 states.
9 states, yeah. Is it a region?
South.
Yes, south. Now, Niger Delta controlling the oil, or Delta control its oil, River State controls its oil, Akwa Ibom State control its oil. How does that work?
When you say Niger Delta, it does not necessarily, it's not necessarily confined to South. Well, there are some people who are included in the Niger Delta because they're oil producing, like Imo and Abia. And they are not from the south, just because they have oil.
From the south.
So when you talk about control of the oil or control of just like I think what I understand by that is just that we should try to run a true federalism where the states are in control of the natural resources
Now,
located in their
now that is the
location.
place that need clarification.
Yeah.
Is it the states or the region? Now, I'm just using that now as an example to the devolution of power itself.
What is recognized in the Constitution is state.
Okay.
Yes, state, yes.
You know, this geopolitical zone or region is not recognized by the 1999 Constitution.
No.
So
What
let's
about the 1963?
Let's just say 3 years, because we had the regions, and then the Constitution made provision also for secession, okay, and then made provision for those little areas for amendment. That was why the Midwestern region came out after the region had, and all that. So I think what you are saying is it that each state, in terms of devolution of power,
control
each state
their resources.
control their resources, or whether
Or it is a regional, exactly.
But since what is recognized in the Constitution is the states, if you are going to have devolution of powers, it means that the states are going to manage their resources. But the problem with that is that if you want to push that to pass at the National Assembly, when you achieve that, there will be no need for a National Assembly. There will be no need for you to have that huge number of persons at the National Assembly. Because if each state now have power to control their resources, it means that the houses of assemblies of those states, that's where power will now come down to.
But isn't that how it's supposed to be? Isn't
That's
that what
supposed
the
to be.
true federalism is?
That's why I said that power should be bottom up. I'm saying the possibility of the current
House.
assembly. So you remember the 8th assembly, they all voted against it. You remember in 2008, in June 2008, when they all voted against it. And then what they were interested in was increase the age of president to reduce it to 40 to 35, reduce this to this and this, and those are the ones that passed. Then the affirmative action, those were ones, but the serious issues that would have put their name in gold, they left it. They all voted against it because if you do that, I think we should do that so that states can partner with
Because what is the need for this constitutional review if we don't have that? Because the agitation, the cry for secession, and the cry for true federalism is let us control our resources.
Yes.
Basically, the whole IPOB and ESN, agitation, and like those like Sunday Igboho fighting for the Yoruba nation. And that's just basically what they are crying about. Give us this or let's go our separate ways.
You see, the problem is this. Like I said earlier, we are actually running a unitary system of government.